Thank you for downloading the Hong Kong Writers Circle podcast. For more information, please visit our website, hkwriterscircle.com. Welcome to the Hong Kong Writers Circle's special podcast series in collaboration with the British Council. In this episode, I interview Tim Moore, who will be appearing at the 2017 Hong Kong Book Fair from the 22nd to 23rd of July at the Hong Kong Exhibition and Convention Centre. Event details and registration information are available at britishcouncil.hk. I'm joined by Tim Moore for this special episode of the Hong Kong Writers Circle podcast in collaboration with the British Council. Tim is a travel writer and humourist and will be in Hong Kong this summer promoting his latest book, The Cyclist Who Went Out in the Cold. Welcome, Tim.
Well, thanks for having me on.
So the title of your latest book references John le Carré's famous novel The Spy Who Came In from the Cold. Did you feel like a secret agent on this excursion?
Well, I'm not sure James Bond would have chosen to ride the entire length of the Iron Curtain on an old East German shopping bike, which is what I did. So it was 9,000 kilometres in 3 months. I went through 20 countries. I
thought you were going to say that you went through 20 bikes.
Well, yes, it was amazing actually, because this bike that I took along with me was it was called the MIFA 900, and it was in East Germany. They produced 3 million of these during the communist era. But they were designed really for nothing more ambitious than pottering about your kind of Weavers Guild cooperative campsite, going down to the shop and coming back with a bottle of beer and a loaf of pumpernickel bread or something. Yeah. So I really pushed this thing way beyond its design capabilities.
Yeah, I mean, and this is a really incredible amount of cycling as well. But you are a cyclist. I mean, you've done other sort of big cycling journeys before, right?
Well, it's kind of, I've had, I suppose these days there are lots of people who do go out and just cycle for the hell of it, but I've had it kind of thrust upon me really in many ways. So I was a kind of accidental long-distance cyclist. When I was a student, I suppose I did start watching the Tour de France on telly, mainly because it was on just after a popular afternoon quiz show on television, which was compulsory watching for students. So I was too lazy to get off my behind and go and change channels. So I started watching the Tour de France, got really into it. Ended up writing a book about riding the route of the Tour de France, and then every few years since then, I've gone off and done a load more of it. But I've got to say, in between these absurdly overambitious ventures that I do on bicycles, I don't really do any cycling at all. I live in London, and it's not really very much fun cycling around in London. So I tend to kind of save it all up, have this, and then just do no cycling, and then go away every 3 years and do far too much of it.
Yeah, and then take the rest of the time to recover. I know what you mean. I used to cycle around London. I used to commute across Tower Bridge, and it can be pretty hairy. And yeah, I was always quite happy to arrive wherever I went cycling in London.
Exactly, that's it. I mean, it does. I mean, in a way, cycling around a city is quite an adventure, and you kind of, it's certainly a lot more interesting than the average commute to work. But I think if I'm going to be doing something that adventurous, I'd rather have a proper adventure unfolding before me rather than just getting to work alive.
Yeah, sure. So tell me a little bit more about the route that you took and some of the experiences that you had.
Well, yes. So it's it's a long way. Obviously, it starts off at the very distant north. I mean, these are some of the most northerly places that are inhabited on Earth, actually, because it does get very far north up there in that part of Europe. So it's the very top of Norway and Finland. First thing I should point out that a lot of people did suggest to me when I pointed out this route to them, and I was going to do this. Well, why don't you start at the sort of the Black Sea Bulgarian end, where it'll be nice and warm, and then go up and finish at the very top bit. So you'll get there in the middle of the summer rather than in the winter, which obviously will mean very cold temperatures, lots of snow, other things very poorly suited to a tiny shopping bicycle with little 20-inch wheels. And I accepted those voices of reason. I think there's two things actually. One is, and they're both pretty embarrassing. One is that it's just the kind of idiot's gravity of the map. It's downhill. If you start in the north and go down to the south, it's just downhill. Um, and the other thing, what's not embarrassing for me actually, it's slightly more embarrassing for Finland. I've been to Finland a few times, and it's quite a big country. And I've got to say, it's a little bit samey, and I thought, do I want the glorious narrative arc of my book to end with 1,700 kilometres of just me on my own and this pan-flat expanse of pine trees and lakes? So I thought, no, I don't want to do that. The only way to make Finland really exciting is to do it in the middle of winter,
Yeah.
which is what I ended up doing.
Yeah. So I mean, did you have like a I sort of envision, people like that do the channel, swim the channel, and they've got like a boat that kind of goes along with them. And did you have like a support team or anything, or were you literally just you and your bike?
It was literally just me on my bike. I mean, my wife did come out after about 3 weeks because I was talking to her on the phone every few days, and I think she actually thought I was losing my mind. Rather than that I might be in any physical distress, although she's from Iceland, so she knows that you don't really mess with that part of the world. So she was concerned for my welfare in many ways, but she was just I think because it's so desolate up there, and I would sometimes go like I mean half a day without seeing another human being or even
Yeah.
a car. And you I mean I could actually in fact plot my descent into madness because I made lots of voice recordings because I had so many, 5 pairs of mittens on. I couldn't exactly get my notebook out and start scribbling down witty and pithy thoughts as they occurred to me. So
Yeah.
I had my phone with a voice recorder on it. The only way to activate this touch screen, because I didn't have any space, I just had to get my nose and wipe it across the screen to activate it, and then just say my stuff into it. And then when I listen to it at the end of the day, you can hear my brain kind of like spooling out of my nose. It's just terrible. I'm just repeating myself every 5 seconds, just gibbering to sort of great snatches of half remembered advertising jingles from my childhood. With it's really quite disturbing. I mean, I did emerge unscathed, and then of course it was a bit of a frying pan fire job because then I went into Russia where the weather was a bit better, but the driving was an awful lot worse, and there was a kind of a sort of rolling air of hostility, really. But one of the things I realised doing these sort of books is the depressing regularity to which countries tend to live up to their least flattering national stereotypes. And you always hoping places will surprise you, but quite often, of course, on an individual level, generally speaking, all people are nice or good people. But Russia really does stretch that maxim, and it was yeah, they I think if tapping into the Cold War narrative, I suppose, and a lot of people in Finland did tell this to me. They said, well, the lesson of the last few decades of Russian life is that they just don't want to get involved in anyone else's lives or problems, because if they do, somehow it might become their problem. So if you have a fall off your silly bike and need attention, they won't want to get involved because suddenly the police might involve. So why were you here? Like, what did you do? So they just want to just leave you alone. So they did kind of ignore me and look at me with some degree of suspicion and hostility, which again I suppose is, that I mean, as far as they were concerned, for many years, Westerners were the enemy, and I from what on my own part as well, I was aware going into Russia. I did feel when you talked about John le Carre, and it did feel a little bit like, because I'm 53 years old, and the first half of my life was spent with well, I mean, on one level, there's a looming shadow of nuclear apocalypse hanging over me, which is a bit of a formative experience to have, and also that these people on the other side of the Iron Curtain were kind of, the baddies. I mean, I was indoctrinated as much as they were to think of me as a sort of the enemy. So it was a bit a bit of an atmosphere, I have to say.
Yeah, sure. Would you describe your book as a political book?
No, that would be casting a flatteringly positive gloss on my capabilities. I mean, I was looking. Obviously, it's interesting for me to see, because I actually went through lots of these areas. I actually went around them in 1990 with my girlfriend at the time in an old clapped out old Saab. So that was just after the Berlin Wall came down, just after nosing into the post-Soviet era. And it was interesting to compare and contrast the mood then and the extent to even now. I mean, it's not even. I mean, people's attitudes are still a bit they've been affected by this legacy. But even the kind of landscape itself, I mean, because there was huge swathes of either side of what would have been the Iron Curtain. There were, like, particularly on the eastern side, like, 3 or 4 kilometres, just they would cut down all the trees and have it. And so it's still sort of, it hasn't really been reclaimed by man yet. So there's this, even in the middle of Germany, they should see, you could trace the line of the former border, because there'd be a sort of pale green little strip of kind of head high trees rather than the big things around them. So it really has left its mark on Europe.
It's incredible, isn't it? Without wanting to sound overly literary, I believe it was Hemingway who said that the best way to understand or to discover a country or a city is by bike, going up the hills and down the valleys, and to really, and as you say, to sort of see and to feel the landscape, and to notice, as the fact that the trees that were cut down haven't grown to the same extent as the ones around them. I mean, that's the narrative is sort of right there in the landscape.
Oh, absolutely. No, and I do think the bicycle is without any doubt at all. And I would quite often just find myself, sometimes on the top of a sand dune in Lithuania, or going into a pushing it through a abandoned Soviet radar station, thinking, if I'd been on any other form of transport, I would never have got to these places. And it's quite extraordinary that the freedom it gives you, and you feel every single, you can smell. I mean, even each country smells differently, and of course, after Finland, which was frankly totally aseptic, because there were no people there and not much growing, and it was really extraordinary to find suddenly my nostrils being kind of assailed on all sides when I went into Russia. You do really engage with the landscape and the country in a way that you just don't on any other kind of form of transport. And I think there's something about the bicycle also, which, I mean, people, you cut in my case, a fairly ridiculous figure, because I was on this silly bike and wearing all these daft clothes to keep myself warm and stuff. But there's something approachable and friendly about a bicycle, which tends to mean, unless they're in Russia, people come and open up to you and they want to find out, well, what's this guy's story?
Yeah.
Probably helps if you're going as slowly as I was.
Yeah.
They could flag you down.
So you have written a number of travelogues with a particular sort of running theme, such as visiting squares on the Monopoly board. You travelled with a donkey across Spain, and I'm aware that other writers and, for me, comedians such as Tony Hawks and Dave Gorman, for example, have done this. I mean, Tony Hawks, he wrote a book about travelling across Ireland with a fridge, I think, which was a bet that came one night in the pub. He made this bet. Do you think that that readers demand this kind of slant on the traditional travel book?
Yes, well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I suppose on a most basic level, people do travel a lot more these days. So it's no longer enough just to go somewhere and say, look at me, I'm in this exciting, exotic, out-of-the-way place that you will never go to, because they've probably already been to it. And I think partly on the back of that, some people have started to rediscover the idea of having an adventure kind of on their own doorstep. So Tony Hawk's just went around. Tony Hawk's going around Ireland would not have been a particularly interesting book, but suddenly, if he's lugging a larder fridge around with him, he can make a story out of it. I think in some ways. I mean, in some ways, it makes it, I think, really, from my point of view, makes it more of a engaging story for me from a purely selfish level. I'm not even really thinking about the reader at this stage. If I just go and drive across Spain or get a train across Spain, am I really kind of getting involved with the the people and the scenery and the cities and stuff? If I have a slightly ridiculously over the top unusual way of getting around places, it certainly keeps my kind of intellectual, creative, imagination juices flowing. I think that's a big part of it. I think from my point of view, the other thing which I do tend to do quite a lot is to have a kind of existing template that I follow. So I'm going in someone's footsteps, or like you said, the Monopoly board, and that's a nice way of telling. I mean, otherwise, I'm frankly, I'm not I'm not clever or versatile enough to tell the story or the history of London in a way that I could boil it down to 250 pages. But the Monopoly board gives you a nice little sort of, distills it into a nice kind of bite-sized portion. And yeah, like a lot of the cycling things I've done. I did the book about the Tour de France, obviously, and there's lots of fantastic history tied into the Tour de France, and it gave me a really good way of telling the history of France and the history of cycling and so on, as well as my own sort of silly attempts to live up to the overwhelmingly brave and resilient performances of actual real sportsmen and stuff.
Yeah, and a book that I've been reading recently is called the Idle Traveller, and I believe it's by Dan Kiernan, which comes out of the Idler magazine.
Yeah.
And his mantra is all about slow travelling and about it's not about arriving. It is about the travelling. It's about that is the essence of going somewhere. It is the actual travelling, not sort of where you get to in the end. In a way, where you get to is kind of that's just the end of the story. That's not the story itself.
Yes, I certainly I do find when I'm doing my sort of book-rated travels, it's curious when I do get to what should be the finish line, whether that's the Bulgarian Black Sea end of the Iron Curtain, or the end of the 1914 tour of Italy route. I get a gigantic sense of anticlimax. I don't really feel that I've finished the journey was the thing, and now that it's finished, there's a sort of bit of a void in my life, and I don't get that kind of sense of closure that you would do from. I mean, it's not about the completing the journey. Of course, there is a whole new journey that awaits me when I come home, and I've got to kind of boil down all of my disparate thoughts into some entertaining narrative, which is always a bit of a challenge. But that I always think of it as that's the the second journey that happens when you come home. Yeah.
Sure, yeah. I mean, and that leads really nicely into my next question, which is, I mean, this podcast that I produce, and much of what I and the Hong Kong Writers Circle do is concerned with the craft of writing. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about your writing process. I mean, you mentioned that you, when you were on your bike using your nose to activate your sound recorder. So you get back, you've got notes or sort of audio notes, and as you say, it's another journey. I mean, what is the process like for you?
Well, like I say, I did. Back in the day, I did used to have a notebook, and I miss the notebook, because actually, when you scribble things down, even at that very early stage, you're not just saying, "Oh, I just saw 2 cows in a field." You're ready to writing things down in a way which you are sort of putting a bit of you're putting your stamp on it, and you're kind of sort of putting the bare bones of how you might construct something you've seen or something that people have said into a more of a narrative style. It's not just a functional recording of events. And because as I suspect I'm probably demonstrating now, I feel like I'm more articulate when I'm writing things down than when I'm speaking. So when I'm droning on into a voice recorder, I do sort of dread it, because I think partly it's so convenient having the idea of being able to just like get out of it and then just mouthing off something that's just happened. You get it all down there rather than having to physically grovel about with a bit of soggy paper and a pen. But it does mean that when I come home, it's this awful moment like the last one I had. I think it was 4,300 voice recordings to transcribe.
Wow.
And it took me, just weeks and weeks and weeks, and that's something that I never used to do, because I used to have the notebooks there when I had a very very advanced system for like little footnotes. So I'd say something, and and then of course like 2 days later that would be something relevant to what I'd just said 2 days before, and I could go back and put it all in there and actually kind of begin to edit my book really on the hoof. And I don't get to do that now. So there's and a really crude rule of thumb is that I would allow 6 months to write a book, but now it's getting longer than that, partly because I'm probably getting old and stupid, but also it takes a good 6 weeks actually, really, to just get all the stuff down. Just move it from the digital recording onto a sort of digital screen, just to
Yeah.
type it all up. So that's a bit of a snore, I've got to say. But and I do actually also make lots of videos on my phone, because that, I mean, there are certain things. I mean, from my point of view as a travel writer, it's you experience so much, and you just think it's very difficult to kind of remember what somewhere looked like, what it felt like, and on every level, from what a place you stayed at was like, or what a mountainside looked like, and people and so on. And that's really, really useful. Particularly the videos I find very, very good for doing that.
Mm.
Google Street View is quite scary, actually. It really is. I mean, so the entire length. I mean, when I was in the Iron Curtain thing, I was literally in the middle of nowhere. I mean, hours from anything sensible where anyone would in their right mind would be visiting or driving through, and I can go to Google Street View, and oh yes, what's quite interesting, I can actually, and I've done this with all the cycling books I've done. I've actually gone back to Google Street View to look at my route, and I find even at any random part I could look at any little scene from anywhere on these 20 countries I went through just now, and oh yeah, I remember that bit. And then when you go in the corner, there's a farm on the left, and then there's a sort of phone box on
Yeah.
the right. Well, I remember all of it. It's quite weird, but that is also quite useful. But it also spoils your fun. I mean, I'm about to go off on another journey, and I'm aware of the fact I could actually look at large parts of my route in a very convincing high definition way on the screen. But that's when I go there and appreciate it, then I've already it's the novelty's gone.
Yeah. So do you feel that, I mean, obviously, like, I guess that the advances in technology, being able to record and audio and video so easily, and to take photos, obviously, and not have to worry about filming cameras and stuff like that. I mean, these are obviously tremendous benefits. But But then you also say that it means that you've got this transcription process even before you start writing yourself. Do you feel that the benefits do outweigh the disadvantages of new technology?
Well, as I say, on the face of it, if someone had described it to me 20 years ago, what I'll be able to do with just a phone in my hand, in terms of taking pictures and making recordings and so on, I would have thought that's absolutely brilliant. I would have bitten your hand off and said, that's what a fantastic invention. As things have panned out, it is a bit of a millstone, and so are things, because of course now people expect you to keep them updated on social media. I
Mm.
mean, I've got to say that I'm not a natural at that. I don't have any kind of Facebook presence, but my publishers did persuade me in a very forceful way to have a Twitter account. So I do tweet my journeys, and it's yeah. I mean, I do now. I do find it quite useful in a way. It's a kind of quite a nice exercise at the end of the day. I mean, for the first couple of books when I did it, I just thought it was a massive chore, and I thought, well, also the part of me was thinking, well, I've just told the whole story now. Who's going to bother buying the book? But that is, if I had several million more Twitter followers than I actually do have, that might be more of a pressing commercial issue. But that's not really going to be a problem. But it is that I now do quite look forward to the tweeting end of the day, just because it's quite nice to just get everything straight in your mind and see, and it's quite a nice way of thinking. Well, what happened today that was actually interesting or thought provoking, or what do people want to know about that I've done? And that does sort of later on help with the kind of the writing process, because you've already discarded things that are actually on in the final analysis just a bit dull, or not different enough from things that happened the day before and stuff. And clearly, when you're riding through quite just desolate countries on a bicycle, there are days and days and days where very little changes. It's quite useful to have been forced to recognise through the discipline of Twitter and I guess other social media as well, what is going to be worth reading when you come to write the book.
Yeah, sure. That's fascinating. So you're visiting Hong Kong as part of the Hong Kong Book Fair with the British Council. Will this be your first time in Hong Kong?
Well, actually, it is. In fact, I was thinking about this when I mean, I've always wanted to go to Hong Kong. Always wanted to go there. I've never even been anywhere near it, I don't think, really. I think part of what it was when I started out travel writing, I had a young family, and it was there's a point with a lot of these journeys where I started thinking, am I? I mean, as everyone who's a travel writer will know, and particularly anyone who isn't a travel writer will know, really, there are times when I don't really consider what I do to be a job. I'm really going on great long, often slightly silly holiday. But if I'm going miles and miles and miles away, that does, and I've got 3 tiny children. My wife might start to say, well, actually, that's a bit self-indulgent. Why don't you do something European-based? So I have tended to not stray too far from home. I've got to say, there's also probably an economic motive. Lots of people always ask me, so do your publishers pay expenses? And the very short answer to that is no, they don't. So they give you an amount of money in advance, and then however you spend it is up to you. So it's kind of, if I go to the other side of the world, and I'm straight away, I'm going to be struggling to make it a kind of profitable exercise. So that's the ugly economic truth is there. But no, I'm absolutely fascinated by that whole part of the world. And now that my kids are older, in fact the youngest is now at university, which makes me feel very, very old. I could, yes. I mean, there's nothing really stopping me going much further afield, and East Asia is somewhere that I mean, it's certainly. I mean, I love my history. I've always have to sort of rein it in, and sometimes my editors over the years have kind of tried to kind of put a break on. Scribble in the margin. Too much history here, Tim, but I can't stop myself really. And you've certainly got the history over in that part of the world, and obviously it's increasingly feels that it's that sort of the certainly the centre of economic gravity is in that part of the world now, and it's somewhere that I've kind of I really am shamefully ignorant about, and it would be fascinating to go there.
Yeah. Oh, well, I can tell you that Hong Kong is awaiting you. And what really quite cool is that in Hong Kong, I mean, I also love cycling, as I mentioned. It's difficult to cycle in Hong Kong. It's not. I mean, if you think London's difficult, Hong Kong's much more difficult. We don't really have cycle lanes. We do in a few certain specific parts, but not generally. But the people who do cycle and do make it work are the people who are transporting. They transport like the big gas canisters for gas burning stoves, and also delivering delivering takeaway food and things like that on these bikes, which are built specifically for that purpose, as you mentioned. The East German bikes were built for that as well, and I'm sure that you will see them sort of going around, and they go through the traffic. I don't even know how they do it. So in a weird way, it's a city that's kind of not set up for cycling at all, and yet there is a small part of it that really is, people really take advantage of it.
I was in India. In fact, again, shameful for a travel writer. I went to India for the first time just a couple of months ago, and you see bicycles being really put to some quite extraordinary tasks in India, and it sounds very much a similar kind of thing. Like I mean, not just 11 people and 4 goats on them, but 4.5 tons of livestock and food and gas canisters and the whole works. Quite inspirational.
With this podcast, I always encourage the guests to see if they can come up with a few writing tips, especially for members of the Hong Kong Writers Circle. And I wonder if you have got a few writing tips that you'd like to share with us.
Well, I suppose most of these are actually things, most of them, any recommendations I would make is things that I'm aware that I don't do. So keep sentences short. I do find that I tend to sort of ramble on and string things together with loads of adverbs and semicolons, and then that's and I'm aware of the fact that a lot of people, some of my neighbours, for instance, say oh yeah, I'm really into cycling, and they try to read some books, and they say, oh, like I couldn't really get to grips with it, and I'm thinking, well, I don't use any big words, but my wife points out, no, but you do have very long sentences. So I think people just to give the reader a kind of bit of a pause, like, keep sentences short. With my second point would be that if you just read in your head aloud what you've written, that will give you an idea whether or not, if you have to start pausing for breath, the sentence is too long. Also, particularly with dialogue, I'm quite amazed. I mean, I don't really have all that much dialogue compared to a lot of books, because it's a lot of time it's just me on my own getting slightly naughty. But I'm always quite intrigued as to how much dialogue when I do read fiction and non-fiction with it is. It just sounds dreadful. I think did the author really not just read it out and say, does this actually sound like someone saying it? Because so often it doesn't. So that's, again, not particularly profound, but that would be something that I would say. If you're trying to be funny, which I guess is something that have traditionally over the years attempted to do, just be prepared for the fact that there is no such thing as the joke that everyone will get.
Yeah.
Really, and also if people don't get a joke, they too tend to take it personally, because they see other people are laughing at something they aren't. You say, "What, you're saying I'm stupid?" Well, so it's a bit of a fraught area, humour. It's not universal, and don't be too disheartened if you think something's really funny, and then other people read it and then they say, "Well, sorry, where's the joke then?" It's probably just it's not you, it's them, their problem. um, and yeah, I suppose again, pretty similar token. A lot of people I know who are trying to get into writing and so on, they said, "Well, I showed it to my my wife or my husband or my friends, and they said it was really great." The thing is, you've got to remember, this sounds a bit blunt, but they are going to tell you it's great, even if it isn't. So don't get too excited if your friends and family say something you've done is great. But at the same time, don't get too despondent if, when you do send it off to somebody whose opinion is probably more useful than anyone who works in publishing, works an agent or an author or an editor. If they tell you that it's not right for them, that often just means it's not right for them. So I mean, almost every author has reams of rejection letters that they'll tell you they had. So don't give up at the first hurdle there. But also don't ever send off an entire draft of a completed book to a publisher or agent, because in my experience they will just put it into what's known as the slush pile, and it will fester there for all eternity and never get read by anyone. So just it's not really a writing tip, is it? It's just a kind of, if you want to be published tip, but a sample chapter and a synopsis of what happens in the other chapters has a much better chance of actually being read.
So you are literally just about to go on another rather unusual road trip, and I am especially appreciative that you have taken a bit of time out from your preparations to speak to me and to do this recording. Can you tell me a little bit about this next trip that you have planned?
Well, there's always a kind of an onus on me to try and do something cycling based, but I think the last one took so much out of me. I just don't think, and because there's also there's an expectation that everything you do will be more demanding physically, and just in general terms than the last one. And I thought, I cannot do something more physically demanding than 9,000 kilometers on a shopping bike. So looking for something which didn't involve bicycles, I can say, but at the same time, I think I've done so many things that recently, well, in the last 10 years, involving old machinery. I've had a bit of a bonding with old machinery, and maybe also in a slight midlife crisis where I've got really into kind of old cars and stuff. And I was reading a sort of history of motoring, and someone said, of course, the car that launched the automobile age was the Model T Ford. And it's a bit similar in a way to that my East German shopping bike, insofar as they'd made like 15 million of these things. They were everywhere, but obviously they were well, I mean, originally they would have been fine, but no, anyway, now they're they're 100 years old. But I thought, well, yeah, I suppose also this does tie into Donald Trump and so on. And it seems that when the Model T Ford came out in 1909, this was the dawn of a new era for America. Their golden age. The American dream, the age of the automobile was just about to get going. And in some ways, it does seem as if now it's sort of hit the buffers slightly, and it's the end of an era. And I thought, well, that'd be a great time to go and drive through Trump voting counties in a Model T Ford. So I'm off. Well, I was supposed to be off in a day or two. It might be actually more like a week or two now. To drive the entire width in a very dilatory Trump voting counties type way across the whole continental USA from east to west it's actually a 1924 car, the one I haven't seen it yet, but I've paid for it, so I hope it's all right. Because it's black, as every Model T Ford should be, in famous words of Henry Ford. Any colour you like, as long as it's black. And it does look a lot like my main experience of Model T4s is seeing Laurel and Hardy drive
Oh my God,
them,
I was just about to say Laurel and Hardy, and they get into it and then they try to drive off and it falls to pieces. Yeah, that
that's
is the image of the Model
absolutely right.
T4.
They were all exactly every single car they ever used in all those sort of stunts was a Model T4. So it's probably not the best way of preparing myself emotionally for this thing is watching Laurel and Hardy drive them through sawmills and get them cut in half and fall to bits at every opportunity and roll out of windows and fall downstairs backwards and things. But nonetheless, that's my car.
Well, it sounds fantastic, and I know that you are going to be kind of. I think I'm correct in saying you're going to be sort of taking a little bit of time out from that journey in order to come to Hong Kong for the book fair. Is that right?
Yes, it's going to be slightly weird in a way. Well, it's quite nice. It'll break it up. So I'm going to be flying out from Chicago. When they first asked me to go to the Hong Kong book fair, I said, oh well, I'm going to be in America. And then I thought, well, actually, I could, here we are in the global age. I can fly from anywhere to anywhere. If they don't mind booking me a flight from America, I'll do that. So it's going to be a very strange interlude, which involves me. I don't know. I mean, I guess I'll be about a month into my journey by then. I've got no idea how far I'll have got or what will have happened to me or the car. But yeah, so I'm going to park it up wherever I am, somehow get to Chicago, fly to Hong Kong, see all the people there and do my stuff and then come back again and continue. So it'll be weird, sort of in a kind of decompression style way. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to process that one. But it'll add a dimension, I've got to say. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So all of the details for your appearance at the book fair will be on the Writers' Circle website and on the British Council website and wherever you discover this podcast, I'll put the details on there as well. And just want to say again, thank you so much, Tim Moore, for taking the time out from your preparations to talk to me today, for being on the Hong Kong Writers' Circle podcast, and looking forward to welcoming you to Hong Kong in the middle of July, if providing that you manage to make your flight in Chicago and don't go through any sawmills unexpectedly.
Well, yes. Thanks, Simon. Thanks for those stirring words. Yes, well, it is even now describing the fact that I'm going to somehow, that me getting onto this flight to Chicago will involve me having somehow successfully navigated quite a long way in this car. Seems ludicrously improbable, but I'm gonna set off and make the best of it in any case.
Oh, I feel like I wasn't really very encouraging. Let me try it again. The Hong Kong Book Fair and the British Council and the Hong Kong Writers' Circle are looking forward to welcoming you this summer.
Well,
How about that? Well, it really was a pleasure to talk to you, and thanks very much.
Cheers. Well, thank you.
The Hong Kong Writers' Circle podcast, episode 28, Tim Moore, Cross, British Council, was produced by me, Simon Overton. For more information about this show and all of our other activities, please visit our website, hkwriterscircle.com. The Cyclist Who Went Out in the Cold is by Tim Moore and published by Penguin. The interview with Tim Moore and his appearance at the Hong Kong Book Fair 2017 was organised by the British Council. The podcast theme music was Jingle Jazz by Quantum Jazz from the album End of Line, used under the terms of a Creative Commons Attribution Share-alike 3.0 license. If you are an author, publisher or musician and would like to collaborate on an episode of this podcast, or for any other feedback, please email hello@hkwriterscircle.com and use the subject line podcast. If you are subscribed to this podcast on iTunes, please consider giving the show a customer rating, as this can help to build our audience and gain exposure for our writers. Thanks as always to Katrina Tay for the podcast artwork.